Over the next 15 years, half of America's farms and ranches will change hands. My guest today, Joel Salatin, is concerned and is working to make sure that they are able to train the next generation of leaders that can manage this upcoming shift.
This topic is the elephant in the room, and I really appreciate you putting your finger on it because it's the topic that nobody wants to talk about because it's taboo. Families don't want to talk about it. Is BlackRock and Bill Gates going to own it all? Which is why I'm just going, 190 miles an hour on a tear to try to germinate young people onto these lands.
According to Joel Salatin, we need to create attractive businesses.
And he said, kids don't want to inherit a hobby. They want to inherit a business.
Foster cultures of innovation.
We have a very aggressive embrace, if I may say, in our team that if you can conceive of a complementary enterprise, we want to say yes.
And teach our employees how to complain.
You can't complain to somebody who can't fix it. You have to go up. You don't go horizontal. That's gossip. You have to go vertical. You have to go to somebody that can actually fix it.
All that and more on this, the 400th episode of the Working Cows podcast, brought to you by the South Dakota Grassland Coalition and Ranch Right.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag studios. And I'm very excited to be joined today by Joel Salatin for the 400th episode of the Working Cows podcast. Been a long time since I talked to Joel, way back on episode 50 of the Working Cows podcast. And that episode will be linked in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/400, and wanted to talk to Joel today about leadership, as you heard in that cold open, which hopefully is going to become the norm around here on the Working Cows podcast. What are we doing to manage the issues surrounding leadership so that this next generation is ready to take over the reins of the operation when this massive transfer of wealth happens in agriculture, as it's probably going to happen in the next 15 years. So we have a short time scale to get this done, and we're going to talk to Joel about that and more on this episode of the Working Cows podcast, right after this word from our sponsor today, the South Dakota Grassland Coalition. It's never too early to start thinking about next year's plan for continuing education. What are you going to do to continue to sharpen the management axe on your operation? South Dakota Grassland Coalition always has a wealth of opportunities, so I think the best thing to do would be to get on their email list by going to sdgrass.org and get on their email list, and you will be sent out a listing of their 2025 grazing schools and workshops. They usually do a holistic management school in the winter. They do 3 grazing schools in varied environments, so you can kind of get a picture of what it looks like maybe in a different environment. You can travel to one that's different than yours and see it there. They do all kinds of stuff all the time, usually do a stockmanship workshop somewhere in the state throughout the year. So just all kinds of opportunities to partner with a great organization and attend one of their grazing schools, their stockmanship workshops, their holistic management workshops. So sdgrass.org is always the place to go and find out what's going on with the South Dakota Grassland Coalition. Get on their email list so that you're notified when they have those dates locked in for 2025. And who knows, maybe we'll see you at one of those events in 2025. Joel, thanks for joining me again on the Working Cows podcast. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Been a long time, all the way back to episode 50 of the Working Cows podcast, but appreciate you and all the work that you've done over the years, just continuing to share so generously of your time and the stuff you guys have learned over many decades of management there at Polyface Farm. So thank you.
We've worked a lot of cows since episode 50, haven't we?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So yeah, today I wanted to talk to you about kind of how you think about succession planning, and maybe more specifically from the perspective of leadership development. Recently, I sat in on a seminar where there was a professor there, had all kinds of fancy charts with multiple shaded colors and bars and lines on it. And really the gist of his whole talk was, if we want to save rural communities, if we want to keep rural communities from shrinking and dying, we need to develop leaders. So I'd like to talk to you today about how do we go about developing leaders? How do we go about developing people who can launch from an internship program and go out and succeed elsewhere, or develop leaders to take the reins for the next generation? So how do you think about that? What are some of the things that frame the way you think about developing leaders?
Yeah, what a great topic. And I'll tell you, this topic is the elephant in the room. And I really appreciate you putting your finger on it, because it's the topic that nobody wants to talk about because it's taboo. Families don't want to talk about it. And it's really but it is the elephant in the room, because half of all America's farmers are now 60 years old, half. So in the next 15 years, half of America's agriculture equity is going to change hands, and it'll either be sold or it'll go to the next generation, many of whom do not want to farm because they've left the farm. And so you hit me with a wonderful, profound thought there at the beginning from this professor. I'll hit you with another one that was profound for me. Back in the summer, we hosted the Stockman Grass Farmer gathering here at Polyface, and one of our speakers was Kit Farrow, the Farrow Cattle Company. He's the largest grass-based seed stock producer in the world. He spoke and started out with this profound statement. He asked everybody assembled. There were a bunch of us here. He said, "So what's the reason kids don't want to come back to the farm?" And of course, everybody said things like prices. They don't want to work. All the typical stuff. And he dropped a bombshell. He said the number one reason kids don't want to come back to the farm is the off-farm job.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just struck me. What? So he explained. And the more he explained it, the more I thought, this guy's onto something. What he said was that the off-farm job allows the average farmer to run their farm like a hobby. And he said, kids don't want to inherit a hobby. They want to inherit a business. And kids aren't stupid. They realize very quickly, is this really a viable business, or is this just typically, I don't want to be sexist here, is this just dad's hobby? That, and I have repeated that several times, partly so I don't forget it, but I just think it was so profound that his thinking. And so it goes along with my thinking, which I've said for decades, that a farm cannot be actually regenerative or sustainable, or whatever word you want to use there, until there are two salaries from two different generations. Now, that second generation could be family. It might not be. It might be a neighbor. It might be a friend. It might be a nephew, niece. It could be somebody totally unrelated. But until you have two salaries from two different generations, you do not have a viable business, because we age and we grow old. And at 60, you don't have the same vigor and ability as you do at 20. Now, you have a lot more wisdom, but you don't have, or experience, but you don't have the energy. And so if you're a sole proprietorship without a new generation coming on, the business, well, I don't care whether it's a cobbler, a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker, that business cycle is going to run your life cycle. You'll have enough energy in your 20s to pick yourself up from your failures. You'll develop mastery in your 30s. You'll get really good in your 40s. It'll be cooking with gas. And then about 60, it starts to get a little bit, it's harder to get out of bed, and I got some aches and pains. And by 70, it's defunct, or it's on the downwind. And that's the cycle. So the only way to break that cycle is to add another person from another generation. Well, that means that as a farm business, we have to figure out how to make that second salary to attract that. We have to have a salary for ourselves, a full-time salary. So So how do you quit the farm? How do you quit the off farm job? That's number one. And then number two, how do we get to where we have a second income? And I can hear the pushback. Well, you don't know how hard this is. You don't know. I can feel the pushback coming back through the through the microphone here. But you asked the question, so I'm giving you my answer. My answer is that until you really have that second term. So let me pay tribute to my dad. My dad always wanted to be a farmer. He never did it. He had an off-farm job, but it wasn't because he didn't want to be on the farm full time. He just he had a couple big setbacks in life, losing the farm in Venezuela and stuff. I won't go into all that story, but the point is, by the time he got here to where we are today, he was, he was in his 50s before it got to where, you could really do it. And frankly, we didn't know as much back then as we do now. So here I'm coming along, and so Teresa and I had saved up enough money to live for 1 year without an income. And so in September 24, 1982, I walked out of I took an off-farm job. Here again, how do you make a living on this farm? Okay, so I get it. All right, I totally get it. And so we, my best blessing was marrying a lady who's more frugal than I am and could cook anything, make clothes. I mean, the whole 9 yards. And so we were able to live very, very cheaply. If we didn't grow it, we didn't eat it. We never went on vacation, didn't have a TV, drove a $50 car, had our own wood for keep us warm in the winter. Just had a very, very low and made an attic apartment in a farmhouse, so we didn't have any rent. And it was mutually beneficial. Dad had gotten older, and that way, he had me to keep the wood stove going. I'd come down at 2 a.m. and stoke the wood stove. He could keep sleeping. That's a good multi-generational deal. All right. So here we are, and we'd saved up enough money by living cheaply that we could go for 1 year. And so I left September 24, 1982, and said, we can live for 1 year. Now, I didn't think it would last. I thought I'd probably have to go back. I said, I'll get so much done in this year of being home full time that, maybe I can, and so that brings up Alan Nation, my greatest mentor next to Dad, always said the first rule of business is you have to fully employ yourself. You can't work 6 months and be off 6 months. You got to fully employ yourself. So I started looking around. Well, what, so we had the beef cows, which I was, and the other rule is you got to direct market. If you're a small farm, you've got to wear the middleman hats, the processor, distributor, marketer. And so I'm finding customers to sell my beef. I put together a slide program to promote the farm and do, talks around in town to Kiwanis and Rotary and Ruritan Club and stuff like that. And to get, I'd get 1 or 2 customers, three customers sometimes after doing one of these presentations. And then I started cutting firewood. That provided a little bit of cash flow. And I picked up some odd jobs. And I helped a guy make some fence. I helped a guy plant trees. When you're living on $300 a month, if you get a $600 side hustle, that carries you a good while, and that's literally what we did. We were able to ease through, and it turned out that I never went back off the farm for a job, but it took us about 3 years till we could, what I call exhale, I think we're going to make it. And so here we are, 4 years into it. We're just barely, we're kind of over the hump, and we realized, hey, we're going to make it. We started raising the chickens and that. And dad had gotten sick by then. He died at 66 years old, which is really, really young, especially now that I'm over that. And so he calls me into the bedroom and he says, bring a piece of paper and a pencil with you. And so I took that in, and so remember, we're just 4 years into, or 5 years at the most into where we we feel like, okay, I think, we're okay. We're going to make it. And he says, let's do a brainstorm. He said, let's brainstorm how many full-time jobs could be earned from this little farm. And we sat there for an hour brainstorming. I still, it's one of my favorite little pieces of paper. I've got it in a file. It's pretty yellowed now because this was in 1987. But we came up with 22 full-time salaries. Now, they weren't all direct farmers. I mean, you've got packaging and processing and, different things. But anyway, I'm giving this as a tribute to my dad, that he had the foresight and the optimism, if you will, to, at that very, very early stage, he realized, okay, I didn't do it, but my son is doing it. That's cool. And so I've got to get him thinking about the next step, because he realized, okay, I'm not going to be, in my 20s forever either. And so we did that paper, and we had 22 full-time positions at that time. Today, if I did the same thing, it would probably be 100, because we now have 22 full-time positions, from the farm. But the point I'm making is that the average farmer lives in a place of scarcity. There's not enough rain, not enough land, not enough price, not enough market, not enough labor, not enough, and it's this constant not enough of everything. And what I'm trying to suggest is that my blessing and my thanksgiving is that I grew up in a home where the glass wasn't half empty, it was half full. And so having that abundancy spirit, we realized, well, there's a lot more that we can do, a lot more that can be done here. Now, I can't do it all, but if I can conceive of an operation that can employ more people, suddenly that makes it an authentic, it makes it a credible attractant to a young person. But if all the young person hears is, ain't no money, it's too much work, if that's all the young person hears, well, what young person wants to jump on that train, a train to nowhere? But if you can create a train going somewhere, kids will jump on it, whether they're your own or friends. They'll jump on that train. And so that's where I would start. That we have to treat it like a business. That means a sharp pencil making, and then we have to open up our minds to be creative enough and optimistic enough to conceive of, well, what else could be done here? We're raising cattle. Well, we can raise chickens. We can raise pigs. We can do, we can do firewood. We can raise tomatoes. We can make tomato soup. We can plant apple trees. And we could even not even sell apples. We could make apple pies and sell apple pies. There's no end. And so when people say, how do you know it's full? Well, I'm not sure it's ever full, because you can always conceive of another complementary enterprise that can be developed on a place. I mean, shiitake mushrooms, tap maple trees, honeybees. I mean, there's no end to it.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, Ranch Right. Death, taxes, and paperwork. Ranch Right can help you avoid one of them. If you're a successful business, then you are probably paying some taxes. But that doesn't mean you have to be stuck inside preparing your paperwork for the accountant. Enlist the team of financial experts at Ranch Right to get you back outside doing more of what you love. They're committed to providing you with actionable financials so that you can build a profitable business and create generational wealth. While some things in life are inevitable, being mystified by your numbers doesn't have to be one of them. If you're ready to entrust the paperwork to a team that actually enjoys this type of stuff, then visit ranchrightllc.com and get back outside to the things that you enjoy. I think what you've talked about here is one of the first steps to succession is make the business attractive. Do people want to come back? Do people want to be here? Is it enjoyable, right? And just to put maybe frame the context a little bit, or do you have a sense of what the average acres per employee in the Shenandoah Valley would be outside of Polyface? I mean, how many acres do people say?
It's in the neighborhood. It's in the neighborhood of, I mean, for livestock, it's in the neighborhood of something over 500 acres.
Right. Right.
And at our place, we generate one every 25.
Right. So, the math in my head, probably you're 40 times, more efficient, right?
It's a lot more. It's a lot more. Yeah. 20. Well,
20 times. Right. Yep.
20 times 25.
Yep.
Yeah. You have problems with math too. I do the same thing. But yeah, when you do it, you're not supposed, there are two rules of math, Clay. You're not supposed to do math in real time in front of people.
Yeah.
You're supposed to do your cheat sheet back here, and then you're kind of looking at your figures while you're on the whiteboard, teaching your class.
No, but I just
this idea of stacking is just huge, and that's a permaculture concept of stacking, but it's real, and
but I think that's the segue, right, to the next step in this process. First, we make the business attractive. Second, we need to stack not just enterprises, and I really appreciate the distinction that you make when you say stacking fiefdoms, because what that means is that there's somebody out there who ultimately has authority over that enterprise. This is their business, and they're the one that's overseeing it. And they might report to somebody else who ends up signing the check at the end of the day, but still they have authority. And I think that's another huge part of the succession process is this person needs to be able to make a decision that they're the one in charge of making it, not they have a checklist and they go do it. No, they've got a direction and they've got a goal and they're trying to accomplish it. Would you agree with that?
Right. So yes, so just so you know, we're now generating 22 salaries from the farm, but not a single person works by the hour. Nobody is hourly wage. It's either salary or performance based, by the piece, and because we want fellow risk takers. We don't want to work with people who bear no risk for if they perform or not. And so, for example, we've got young people that raise eggs for us, and so they get paid a certain amount per saleable dozen. They don't get paid anything for unsaleable dozen. Okay, so much per. Well, that means that if they fail to close the egg mobile and a fox gets in there and gets the chickens, they just had a reduction in their paycheck. Or if the eggs are dirty and it takes them twice as long to clean, now suddenly they're not getting as much per hour for their labor. And so the way you establish this is with benchmarks of value per activity. So doing time and motion studies, we create benchmarks for efficiency. In other words, 30 seconds to gut a chicken, 20 minutes to put away 30 dozen eggs, 60 seconds to move a chicken shelter. I mean, I can go down the line, but 45 minutes to move a herd of cows and take down their back fence and set it up as a brake fence, again, those kind of things. And so we have established these kinds of by watching our clock, doing a time and motion study, then you create a value for the various activities. Now, suddenly you have a benchmark that you can actually put an opportunity sheet out there, and somebody now can build their own compensation plan on their own and develop their own compensation plan. Some people want to earn more and work more. Some people actually don't want to earn as much and want to work a little less and have 2 months off in the winter, for example, to do a mission project in Haiti or whatever. I mean, we've learned that different people have different kinds of really deep personal goals. And if you just do by the hour, you actually turn them into a very inflexible thing. So if we if we create basically an opportunity sheet, and you can pick this. Well, I'll do one pair of eggmobiles. I'll do 500 turkeys. I'll do a herd of cows. I'll do 3 groups of pigs. I'll do 1,000 pounds of tomatoes. You basically can build your own compensation package, and based on what you like to do, what you don't like to do. Now, it's not anarchy. Everybody wants cows. Okay, everybody wants cows, but we won't let them have the cows without an eggmobile behind them. Okay, so if you do a group of cows, you got to do an eggmobile behind them. So it's not anarchy. There are some rules, but you get the concept. And then the other thing that we do is we're getting into the mechanics of this. I do want to get into the psychology of it a little bit, but one other element in the mechanics of it is that all of our team members, and of course a team starts with 2, right? So even though we have a team now of over 20, we started with a pretty a low team, Teresa and I. Okay, and so we have a very aggressive embrace, if I may say, in our team, that if you can conceive of a complementary enterprise, not competitive, but complementary to what we're doing, we want to say yes. And so all of our people are able to have an encouraging atmosphere to look around and conceive. So we have of other enterprises. And so Eric and Leanna, they're our longest. They've been with us 13 years now. He's our apprentice manager, and she's our inventory manager. Well, a couple of years ago, they came to us and said, we've never done any hospitality as far as overnights or people staying here at the farm. We'd like to dip our toe in that water. Could we do it? Well, sure. So we picked a site up on a hill, and he built a little cottage thing and a shower room and a LED. It's off grid. There's no power up there. And it's a wonderful $20,000 side hustle for them. They love it. Of course, people love to spend the night here. We get a royalty because if it weren't for us, they couldn't do it. But it's not Airbnb. It's just on our website. But the point is that they knew that they would get we would do everything possible to say yes to their idea. They also do maple syrup. We have another guy a couple years ago. He wanted to do heritage corn, so he got this little old 1900 little mill, electric motor. He was real mechanical, and he set this thing up. He grew about a half acre of Indian corn. This bloody, well, no, it was bloody butcher corn, actually. Bloody butcher corn. Dried it down, made cornmeal and stuff, and made a nice little side income from this little side gig that he had. And so we've got all sorts of things that have developed from these side gigs. And so and so they get to tap into our customer base, our labor base, our equipment base, our land base, and develop their own enterprise under their own autonomy and their own authority. We don't give them any money for it. We don't put in any capital. But they share risk, and it's really positive that way.
I think what you're talking about here is fostering a culture of innovation, right?
Yeah.
You're fostering a culture of innovation. People are free to experiment. That we're going to try to say yes. We'll give you the space to do it, and there will be a royalty. You talk about the corn, raising the corn. I was talking to John Kemp recently, and he told me about somebody raising corn, similar kind of a scenario, selling the milled corn for $15 a pound. Mm-hmm. And I said, I need to tap on my microphone here and make sure everybody heard what you said. You didn't say $15 a bushel. You said $15 a pound, and I mean that I think we get so siloed in agriculture into the commodity mindset that we have no concept of what these things could actually be worth if we were willing to do things differently, know, and that goes back to that whole mindset of making this business attractive. We're going to attract the next generation back to it. We're going to have this abundance mindset. We're going to have this culture of innovation, so much really powerful stuff.
Let me spend 1 minute on that culture of innovation. I speak and travel all over the world, and I don't know how many times I've had, a 40-something or 50-year-old in the room. I'm doing a farm, seminar, and they say, but Dad won't let me do anything. Dad won't let me try anything. And every time I get into not every time, most of the times when I get into multi-generational farm counseling, consulting things, there's this tension where the younger generation can't innovate and can't do because Dad thinks it's a stupid idea, or well, we've never done it that way, or there's a million reasons to say no. And so the way I get people to punch through that is to sit them both down and say, okay, I get it. Dad, you think the young person is going to, lose the company store that you've spent your life trying to do. Young person, you think Dad just wants to shut you down. And so here's what we got to do. Dad, where is something, or what is something that you're willing to let an experiment be done? Give me the acreage. Look, and these folks have whatever, 1,000 acres. There's got to be a 5 acre somewhere that it's not going to sink the mothership if it all fails. If the blueberry patch doesn't fail, or whatever. Okay, so give me the acreage. Now, young person, here's what Dad says you can experiment with. Now you have to be satisfied with that level of experimentation, and you have to perform on that level of that he's willing to let you experiment with. And that's the way you punch through that intergenerational tension. It's natural for the old ones, for the old folks that have created the equity and the capital, to be concerned that the young people, had it easier, or, whatever. And it's easy for the young people to not appreciate the number of sleepless nights that Dad and Mom stayed up with the cow, or helped pull the calf, or whatever, is going on. And so you both have to come to this recognition. So I just wanted to point that out, because I see that all the time. And innovation, creativity, look, you gotta break off something. You gotta say, okay, yeah, here's a pool you can swim in. Now, show me you can swim. Because here's the problem. Many, I don't want to broad too brush, but many farmers don't let their kids experiment enough to show they're savvy. And then when Dad gets too old to actually do the work, now the second generation has not had the opportunity to build up enough trust for Dad to relinquish control. And so this is where you have to start early, giving autonomy to sink or swim, so that when Dad gets old, like right now, I mean, for me, I know I could die tomorrow and there wouldn't be a hiccup here. I'm the least important guy on the farm now. They still like me around, and I still do some things, but from a day-to-day operation standpoint, when I leave or come in to do a podcast, I'm the most expendable person on the farm day to day. And there's great joy in that, because now I don't have to worry about, that baton's been passed, we're good to go.
Well, and it frees you up. We all benefit from that freedom that you have. So really appreciate that for sure. You mentioned earlier about talking about the psychology. We were talking about the mechanics of that certain topic, and now you said you wanted to talk about the psychology. Did we cover the psychology of that as well when we talked about the fostering a culture of innovation, or did you have more to say there?
I think that on the psychology end, we put a lot of emphasis on leadership. We, like, for example, right now here during the winter, the 4 apprentices that we have, so they were stewards back this summer. It's a 5-month program, May 1 to September 30. Then out of those stewards come the apprentices, and they stay here for another 12 months and become the first level managers of next year's stewards. And so during the winter, when we just have the apprentices here, because we have a lot more work in the summer than the winter. So we our labor can drop down in the winter. In the winter, then all these apprentices read Extreme Ownership by Jocko, whatever his name is.
Willink.
Yeah. And Daniel goes through chapter by chapter with them every week when they have dinner at his house, walking through that book, so that by spring they've read the book, discussed the concepts in those chapters, and they're ready to go for the next spring. When the stewards come, we spend a week of orientation. One day is devoted to how do you complain, the chain of command, because there's roughly 25 of us who live here on the farm during the summer, and boy, that's a hot potato for perceptions and expectations, and especially when you got 11 people who've never met each other, you throw them into a dorm situation. They're living together, eating together, working together, and so what a normal outfit would, the kind of interpersonal relationships that would either develop or unravel in a 10-year employment situation, it happens here in about 3 weeks. So we spend a lot of, most people don't realize how much time we invest in actually dealing with, you have to go up. In other words, you can't complain to somebody who can't fix it. If there's a problem, you have to go up. You don't go horizontal. That's gossip. You have to go vertical. You have to go to somebody that can actually fix it. And so we put a lot of attention on developing leadership within our management team, and then we also put a lot of emphasis on the new folks coming in day one. Here's what's acceptable. Here's what's not acceptable, and that's what I call the psychology of leadership. They have to trust us that we are going to listen if they bring something to our attention, and we have to make them very, very aware of our expectations. I'll tell you one of the things that we did once. They get a whole little booklet portfolio thing. For example, one of the sheets of paper in there is their own learning checklist. So there's things in there like gutting a chicken, sorting cows. There's all these things that they're going to learn to do. Some things we want them to do, 2 or 3 times. Some of them only once. And it's their own personal report card. So as the summer progresses and they get down to 1 month left, oh, I haven't checked this box. All right. We say, it's up to you. It's up to you to tell us what you haven't done. We're not going to keep all this straight. Who sorted cows, who went on a buying club run, who moved the chickens over to Gray Gables last week. We're not going to keep up with that. You have to run your own checklist, keep up with it. And so when we say we need a volunteer to go, move pigs up the mountain tomorrow, if that's not checked on your checklist, you raise your hand and say, yes, I'm going. So that's a critical element that we do as well. And then during the season, every week of the year, we have a 9:00 Monday morning planning session with the staff to go over the week's workload. Now, of course, it's very weather related and, farming. I mean, there's always, but we got a whiteboard. We've got the week mapped out for the basic things. We got to move cows from here to here. We got to butcher chickens on this day. We've got to, go work over here another day, make hay this day, that sort of thing. So you kind of get a basic idea of leadership. And in the summer, when the stewards are here, we meet about a half an hour before we let the stewards in. So we can, as a leadership team, and when I say the leadership team, I mean, that's now, about 8 of us. So we can actually meet. And if somebody's got a problem with somebody's either not on the leadership team, if you've got a problem on the leadership team, you move up. Okay. But this is, is there a steward that's lagging? Is there somebody that's not doing? Is there do you hear any relational issues developing? So we meet for a half an hour before, kind of scope out things, and then all the stewards come in and they get the, here's the week's thing, and we're all smiling. We got it doped out, and so we take that that pre-planning, so that when they come in, they're not having to sit through all the wrangling that might happen because they don't know enough. To them, it might sound like an argument. Well, it's not an argument. We're just, we got to figure it out, okay? And just like, mom and dad, you're going to have an argument, but you don't do it in front of your 3-year-old. You put the 3-year-old to bed, and then you go and you duke it out. And so that's kind of the way that's leadership. That's protecting. That's protecting your folks coming behind you from having the emotional angst of going through your wrestling. You're wrestling with things that they don't need to wrestle with right now. And so you don't want to do that.
Yeah. I've been preparing to give a leadership talk that will probably have already happened by the time this comes out. But one of the things that I've been thinking about in regard to that is that we should never chalk up to malfeasance or never chalk up to intent something that can be attributed to ineptitude or oversight. When we're feeling slighted or we're feeling like somebody didn't notice us or didn't pay attention to us or did something, we should never chalk that up to intent if it simply could be attributed to ineptitude or oversight. And I think that...
Oh, man. You're speaking my language, boy. That is so dead on. And I even get crossways of a lot of my friends in this chemical free movement, because I won't attribute bad intent to government regulators that I see as trying to put us out of business. No, if you go talk to them, we're trying to protect the public safety. We don't want people hurt with bad food, so we gotta, and I gotta give it to them. I can't sit here and say you have evil intents. That's why I hate, hate crimes. The whole idea of trying to come up with somebody's intent, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. You've got to assume that the other person has your best interests at heart. You might disagree 180 degrees on procedure, but you have to, because if I think that your intent is bad, we don't have any place to talk. We can't have a discussion if I think your intent is bad. But if I think your intent is good, and we just have two different paths to get to a place, well, then we can talk about which path is better to take.
And I think that goes to that point about we're going to go up. If we've got an issue with somebody, we're going to take it up the command chain rather than talk to somebody else about it, because that's gossip, right? And that's so often what happens. And I just really appreciated that. One of the things that you said way back at the beginning of this conversation was that we're facing a massive equity transfer in agriculture. And very true. In the next 15 years, it's going to shift wildly. Now, here's the problem with that, is that leaves the door cracked open or maybe kicked all the way open for massive amounts of further vertical integration in our supply chain. And so it's a vulnerability, I think, in our food system, this equity transfer that's coming. And so I think that gives us some sense of the import, or why this discussion is important, because we need leaders who are ready to avoid that, because those guys are going to come with a check to buy the whole operation and all of its infrastructure and all of the livestock, and that check's going to be good, and you're going to have to be able to resist taking that check and moving to town and letting the supply chain get vertically integrated. Would you agree that that's one of the dangers of this equity transfer?
Well, it certainly is. It certainly is. I mean, is BlackRock and Bill Gates going to own it all, or whatever? Some Chinese outfit or whatever. So yeah, that's a huge danger, which is why I'm on a tear. I'm just going 190 miles an hour on a tear to try to germinate young people onto these lands, because I want this land to go to a new generation of young caretakers who will love it and steward it as if it's actually God's creation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in that regard, one of the neat things when you talk about succession is layering on additional enterprises. So one of the biggest hurdles, impediments to young people getting into agriculture is the price of farmland. And so, if you've read any of my stuff, I'm a big advocate for, you don't have to own the land. All you have to do is have an access to it. If you got access to land, that's all you need. Now, there are some things that become pretty difficult if you don't own the land. For example, a fruit tree orchard, apple orchard. That gets kind of, it's hard to move an apple tree orchard, okay? But but everything from gardening, produce, vegetables, microgreens to livestock. If you're using pastured, movable infrastructure, all of that is portable. It's mobile, and so we've had the delight of seeing a lot of our young people leave and go and start farming full time on land they don't own as a complementary enterprise. So I get letters, Clay, if you can believe this, from 80-year-old farmers saying, "Can you find me a young person to inherit my farm to? Because if I give it to my kids, they're going to develop it. They've never really liked it, and they're going to develop, and I love it too much. Can you find me a young person to inherit it to?" And so I'm looking around, and well, where are they? The pool of young people. There's a lot of them in the basement playing video games. I'm looking for the one that's, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed out there tending a tomato plant. That's the one I'm looking for. And so, what the downside, or you just mentioned the concern of all this, equity transfer, but the upside is that never before have we had this much opportunity for a young person to get in, and this much opportunity to be able for a rural operation to access the marketplace with electronic aggregation, online shopping carts. I mean, and frankly, the consumer desire for that. And so there is I can tell you, I just feel like it would be much easier to start farming today than it was when Teresa and I started, because it was phone calls, snail mail. There was no UPS. There was no, there was USPS, but there was no. So this has happened in our lifetime, to be able to actually to bring the retail interface directly into your farm via your computer modem. All right. That's pretty cool. And so we do have this opportunity. And so this is, look, there's not a cattle farm, corn farm, wheat farm, or orchard in the country that wouldn't benefit from pastured poultry, meat, eggs, turkey, ducks, geese, whatever. And you can do all that with portable infrastructure. And so I think that we just need to really, really think creative. And if there's an older farmer here listening to this, and you're desperate for young hands, I'll just mention this, that most farmers my age are lonelier than they've ever been in their life. Mm. The kids are grown and gone. It's just, mama and me, and I'm not moving that fast anymore. And they, and the world doesn't appreciate us. And so older farmers, it's tough. And so the joy of my life is I'm at this age, I'm surrounded by these 20 bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, enthusiastic young people that just can't wait to spend their life doing what I've done. And, you go out and let's gather eggs. What? We get to, you mean we get to gather eggs? Really? We get to gather eggs? Yeah. You get to gather eggs, and boy, what that does to an old geezer like me to have that level of youthful enthusiasm and excitement about what I've done all my life. It breaks me down in tears. I just can't believe it. And so there are a lot of old, what I call hermit curmudgeon farmers. I don't want anybody around. It's going to be me and Matilda and nobody else, and And I get that. All right, I get that. But I tell these guys, I say, all right, look, I get that, but look in the mirror, and I want you to tell yourself, I really do want to grow old alone. I really do want to grow old alone.
Mm.
And if you can tell yourself that and believe it, fine, go ahead. Most people can't say that to themselves. Most people want youthful energy in their waning years, a second hand to hold up a board to nail it. I mean, how many things on a farm are 1 + 1 = 3? Mm-hmm. And so the time to start this, and I'll say this to your middle-aged farmers, the guys that are 40, this is the time to start. Don't sit here and piddle around and wait till you're 60 and say, well, I'll get a second person. No. You start now with a strategy, an action plan to recruit, to find, to get on your farm full time, innovate, do some other things, bring on a young person, bring on partners. They don't have to be employees. They're not employees. Okay. But you bring on other young people that have strengths where we brought on a young person. He was real mechanical. He did an apprenticeship. He wanted to stay here. So what are you going to do? He said, well, I want to be a mechanic. So he started a mechanic shop on the farm. I'm sure it's illegal as sin. We didn't get a permit for it. Next thing you know, not only is he fixing all of our stuff, he's fixing the neighbor stuff. Now and he's working a full-time living as a self-employed entrepreneur with his own business. We called it, Farm Fix. And then he got married and went on and do other things. But what all I'm saying is there's a million things. If you've got a talent and ability, woodworking, handyman stuff, there are tons of ways for you to generate an income on your place, stay home, and develop a bona fide business that'll attract a young person.
Yeah, absolutely. And that story is definitely replicatable in a lot of places. If you've got somebody with some of those mechanical skills and the space for them to work on stuff, there is so much opportunity everywhere in the country for that to be one of those complementary enterprises. I really appreciate that. We've covered a lot of ground here today, from making the business attractive to fostering a culture of innovation to teaching people how to complain. What are some of the other leadership keys or keys that you think these guys and gals need to have, these leadership skills, before we turn them out into the world? And how are you going about developing them there at Polyface?
I would say purpose. I don't know how to make purpose. Look, you're not just growing beans. You're not just growing chickens. You're actually serving people their sustenance, their provenance. We have a complete breakdown in our culture right now between the eater and the producer. And if you can close that loop, I can't tell you what that does. So our young people every day are encountering customers who come here and buy stuff that they've raised. They produce it, and tell them how appreciative they are of, I'm so glad you guys are here. Our family depends on you, blah, blah, blah. And to get that kind of personal affirmation. Listen, it's lonely out there at the top, and very few people in our culture are loving on farmers. Farmers get blamed for everything. They get blamed for disease, for poor food, for fires. I mean, cow farts. Farmers get blamed for all sorts of stuff. And so part of leadership, I think, is actually looking beyond the lonely throne at the top that you occupy, and how do I surround myself with affirmation and with encouragement to lead. By definition, a leader has somebody behind them. If you're out here by yourself, by definition, you're not a leader. You're a maverick. You're a whatever. But you're not a leader. A leader is someone who has somebody following you, and so one of the best ways to make sure that people are following you is that you are actually practicing what we call here servant leadership. We are serving our customers. We view our customers as deserving of our best attention and best service. And so when they come and respond accordingly, thank you. That gives us a following, which then attracts people from all walks of life, whether it's somebody following wanting to, oh man, I like that. I'm going to get into the farming. Oh, I'm going to get into the buying. I'm going to get into the truck driving, distribution of it, whatever. But it attracts people. And so, so bone up on your storytelling, your communication, your ability to explain your heart to folks in a way that attracts them to you.
Yeah, for sure. Earlier, you mentioned the book Extreme Ownership. Are there other curricula or resources that you guys really think highly of as far as developing leaders?
Oh my! Well, there's Zig Ziglar's Zig Ziglar Meet You at the Top. They don't come better than that. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is really good. I could make a list, but yeah. I mean, I read whatever motivational and leadership books. Brene Brown. Mm-hmm. Her stuff is fantastic. That's all really good stuff. And so, get your head out of the Corn magazine and read some good leadership stuff. Yeah.
Are there old ones that people forget? I think of like How to Win Friends and Influence People by
Dale Carnegie.
Dale Carnegie. Are there older ones that people forget?
Well, that's a good one. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People now has some age to it. Sure. It was in the it's been several decades since that was written. He's passed away now. Those are all good.
I asked that question to a Facebook group one time, and somebody said something by Marcus Aurelius, and I can't remember which one of his, but I was like, well, that's an old one.
that is an old one. Yeah, I've got one here I'm working through by Cicero, the Roman, and it's quite an interesting. Now that's not a leadership book; it's a farm book on. But I'll tell you what, his statistics on what they were growing in Italy in that time is unbelievable. I mean, like 10 tons of hay per acre. I mean, it just the measurements are out of this world. So it's pretty amazing.
Well, very good, Joel. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for sharing so generously.
You're welcome, and it's great to be with you, Clay.
Well, there's a reason. He's one of the most sought-after voices in the industry, and very good stuff there with Joel. Really appreciate him taking the time to share some of his thoughts on developing leaders and some very good wisdom, practical wisdom there. Really appreciate that. Coming up next week on the Working Cows podcast, we're going to be talking to Josh and Tara Dukart again. Going to be talking to them about an upcoming workshop that they have with the Eastern Montana Regenerative Agriculture Group in Miles City, and you can attend that. There will be a link in today's show notes page as well as next week's. But it's an opportunity to brush up on your communication skills. They're going to be talking all about communication and leadership there at the Eastern Montana Regenerative Agriculture Group's annual meeting. So look for that coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast. We'll see you then.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.